Hello, my name is Millie. I'm 62 years old, and I want to share a story that changed my life forever. It all started during my husband's retirement banquet. The room was full of friends, neighbors, and family, everyone smiling, clinking glasses, enjoying the evening. Until he stood up and said, "I'm leaving you for someone younger." My heart froze as I saw his mistress laugh openly across the table. Silence fell like a heavy curtain, forks suspended midair, and all eyes turned to me. I stayed calm, even though my heart was pounding, and said, "Thanks for the warning." Then, with a steady hand, I placed an envelope in his trembling grasp. What he found inside left him screaming in disbelief. That envelope contained divorce papers, every asset frozen, every document carefully prepared to protect what was mine. I could see the shock, the anger, the fear all flashing across his face, and for a moment, the man I had trusted for decades was completely powerless. But that was just the beginning. What happened next would unravel secrets, reveal betrayals, and change our family forever. You won't believe the twists that followed, the truths that came to light, and the choices I had to make. But before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading your comments and knowing where you are. Now let's understand how this story really began. I had always imagined my husband's retirement banquet as a celebration of our shared life, a moment to honor decades of work, loyalty, and memories built together in our quiet Boise community. The hall was modest but warm, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and greets you like family. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft golden glow over the wooden floor, and the hum of conversation filled the air, punctuated by laughter and the occasional clink of wine glasses. I had spent the morning arranging flowers in pastel hues, setting plates carefully, straightening napkins, and smoothing my dress, a deep teal that I thought complemented my silver hair, and the subtle elegance I hoped the evening would hold. As guests arrived, I felt a light flutter in my chest, a mixture of pride and affection. There was Jack, my son, with that steady, warm smile of his, already helping carry extra chairs for elderly neighbors. And Richard, my husband of over 40 years, was there too, smiling, shaking hands, placing his arm around my shoulder at times, the picture of propriety. Everything seemed normal, almost serene, until he stood at the podium, cleared his throat, and changed everything with a voice that would haunt me in echoes for days. "I'm leaving you for someone younger," he announced, as if reading from a script written solely to shatter me. The words seemed to hang in the air, stretching and twisting like smoke. For a moment, the room froze. Forks hovered midair, conversations died mid-sentence, and the soft laughter of children stopped abruptly. Across the table, Vanessa, his mistress, the woman I had never fully acknowledged but always suspected, laughed openly, her red lipstick smearing slightly onto the rim of her wineglass. She seemed to relish the shock, her eyes alight with triumph, a cruel mirror of my disbelief. My heart pounded violently, yet my outward calm remained. I had always believed in the good in people. I had spent my life baking pies for neighbors, volunteering at the local shelter, lending my ears and hands where they were needed. But this betrayal burned with a fierceness I had never known. I felt it in every vein, a wildfire of humiliation and grief spreading through me. And yet, in that suspended, suffocating silence, I chose composure. I smiled, soft, controlled, and reached into my clutch. "Thanks for the warning," I said quietly, almost tenderly, as if the kindness in my tone could soothe the jagged edges of the moment. I placed a thick envelope into his trembling hand. Richard froze, his confident facade cracking. I saw the color drain from his face as he tore the envelope open, and his eyes widened in disbelief. "What the hell is this?" he screamed, his voice a jagged edge of panic and rage. Divorce papers, meticulously signed and notarized, lay within, every asset frozen. The house we had built together, our shared savings, his pension, all secured against his schemes. I had taken the care to ensure every document was airtight, legally binding, and just. My hands trembled slightly, but my resolve was steady. I had prepared for this confrontation in a way that protected not just myself, but Jack, our home, and the integrity of all I had worked for. The room remained hushed, neighbors and friends caught between disbelief and sympathy. I could see whispers spreading, hands clutching arms, eyes darting between Richard's panicked face and me. My pulse slowed, but only barely. And then my phone buzzed. A small vibration in my clutch, a tiny lifeline amid chaos. I peeked at the screen, and Jack's message made me feel a flicker of hope amid the firestorm. "Mom, come quick! Dad's hiding something big at home." Even as anger surged through me, I felt a protective, almost maternal instinct for my son. He had always been my anchor, a calm presence in the storms of life. I tucked my phone away, letting a quiet determination settle over me. This night was not just a banquet of betrayal. It was the moment where everything changed, and I would meet that change head-on with clarity and courage. Richard's screams echoed faintly behind me as I moved with measured grace toward the exit, my mind already spinning with plans. His audacity, his arrogance, and his betrayal would not define the rest of my life. The warmth of the hall, the supportive eyes of neighbors, and the silent strength in my chest reminded me that I was not alone. This was the night the old Millie, the trusting, forgiving, sometimes naive Millie was forced to step aside, and a new version of me, fierce and unyielding, began to rise. As I stepped into the crisp Idaho night, the scent of pine and distant wood smoke greeted me. I breathed deeply, letting the cool air fill my lungs, letting it remind me that life, even when shattered, is still beautiful, still ours to shape. Betrayal may have arrived at the banquet, but I was ready to turn it into a beginning. A spark that would ignite justice, resilience, and ultimately a reclamation of everything that mattered. Back home that night, the silence of our house pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't lift. The lights were dim, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound beside my own thoughts racing in relentless circles. I had expected chaos, maybe some small shred of Richard's shame. But instead I found the cold, hollow aftermath of betrayal. Jack was already pacing near the kitchen, a frown etched deep on his young but steady face. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he rubbed his hands together, a nervous habit he'd carried since childhood whenever life pressed too hard. "Mom," he began cautiously, his voice low, almost afraid, "I found something in Dad's desk. Old letters. You need to see this." His hand trembled slightly as he extended a stack of yellowed pages, their edges brittle like dried leaves in autumn. The sight alone brought a lump to my throat. I reached for them, my fingers brushing his, a fleeting connection amid the storm. "Vanessa's not just the mistress," he whispered, barely audible, eyes wide with both fear and a hint of anger. I took the letters, letting my eyes scan the faded ink, the looping handwriting I recognized instantly as Richard's. With every line I read, a part of me broke. My inheritance from Grandma, what I had thought was a small, cherished security for my later years, had been siphoned from me over years under the guise of family needs. And all the while, Vanessa's salon flourished, her name inked across lease agreements and supplier contracts, a testament to my husband's deceit. I sank into a chair, clutching the letters like a lifeline, and the tears came, slow at first, then faster, hot and bitter, as if they were washing away decades of misplaced trust. Jack knelt beside me, placing a comforting hand over mine. "I'm sorry, Mom," he murmured. His voice trembled, not with shame, but with sorrow at seeing me hurt. I looked up at him, catching the glint of unshed tears in his eyes, and felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. I had always seen him as my rock, a boy who had grown into a man capable of steadying even the most turbulent storms. Together, we had patched leaky faucets in the kitchen, grilled Sunday barbecues for neighbors, shared quiet nights with heartfelt laughter. And now, he was my anchor once again, this time in the deepest betrayal of all. Reading those letters, I felt indignation rise, a fire I could not contain. I had forgiven him for late nights, for unexplained trips, for the countless little deceits I had turned blind eyes to in the name of love. I had been patient, generous, and forgiving sometimes to my own detriment. But this theft, this deliberate manipulation of trust and love for selfish gain, crossed a line I could no longer ignore. My fingers tightened around the edges of the paper. I could almost feel the weight of every stolen penny, every opportunity he had denied me. "We'll fight this together," I said softly, but with a clarity that carried authority and determination. Jack nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips, the first flicker of hope we had shared that evening. I could feel my inner strength stir, the same strength that had carried me through years of quiet work, volunteer hours, and the ordinary trials of life. And though my heart still ached, the fire of resolve burned stronger. We embraced then, holding each other tightly in the dim light of our living room, letting the shared grief and solidarity knit us together. I closed my eyes, inhaling the familiar scent of his hair, the reassurance of his warmth, and allowed myself a moment of silent mourning for the innocence I had lost. It was raw, painful, and real, but it was necessary. Healing always began with truth, no matter how bitter. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Its sound pierced the fragile cocoon we had created, sharp and unwelcome. Jack flinched, but I rose slowly, moving toward the door with a cautious grace. Peering through the peephole, I froze for a heartbeat. Vanessa stood there, smirking as if she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. She held a manila envelope in one hand and a set of papers in the other, the kind of confident, poised arrogance that made my stomach churn. Richard forgot his keys. "And this," she said sweetly, almost mockingly, waving the documents in my direction. Her eyes, gleaming with mischief, swept over the familiar features of our home. Lingering on the windows I had washed that morning, the door I had polished until it gleamed. "Thought you'd like to see it," she added, her tone dripping with condescension. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with a rising determination. I recognized immediately what these papers were: option papers. She called it her niece. Yet even as I accepted them from her, my intuition screamed that this was more than just a formality, more than an innocent girl needing a home. My gaze swept over Jack, who stood rigid behind me, his jaw tight with anger and protectiveness. I felt a surge of resolve. We had already faced the first blow of betrayal, and I would not allow another deception to penetrate the fragile stability we were rebuilding. With careful hands, I took the envelope, my eyes meeting Vanessa's with a quiet, unyielding challenge. Inside, the documents were official, formal, precise, and yet, I knew instinctively, the truth behind them would be far more complicated. I felt a flicker of empathy for the child at the center of this, for she would be the innocent caught in the web of deceit spun by adults. And at that moment, I made a silent vow. No matter what lay ahead, Jack and I would face it together, with courage, with integrity, and with the kind of strength that only comes from love and righteous anger combined. We stepped back from the door, closing it gently but firmly, the lock clicking with a satisfying finality. I took a deep breath, letting the tension in my shoulders ease just slightly. The night was still long, the battles ahead uncertain. But one truth was already clear. Nothing would stop me from uncovering the depth of Richard's betrayal and protecting my family, my home, and the heart I refused to let him steal. The fire of indignation had turned into a steady flame, and I knew it would guide me through every shadow of the coming storm. The revelation hit me like a winter wind through thin glass. Vanessa's niece, The one she had paraded in front of me with that smug, rehearsed smile was not who she claimed to be. I had quietly, carefully run a DNA test after that first uneasy encounter at the door, my hands trembling as I sealed the sample and mailed it off, hoping it would all be some misunderstanding. But the results came back undeniable. Lily, the sweet-faced, hesitant girl, was Richard's daughter, the product of a secret affair from 2 decades ago, hidden meticulously to deny me the right to shared custody and the financial equity I had every claim to. I felt my blood boil, a rising tide of anger and betrayal I had never imagined possible. For 20 years, I had raised Jack alone, believing in second chances, believing that love and trust could guide our family through any storm. While Richard pursued his secret life, I had been the one who stayed awake with sick children, the one who bandaged scraped knees, the one who celebrated small victories and mourned the losses. And now, to learn that he had carefully constructed this deception, weaving it into the fabric of our lives to cheat me once again, it was almost too much to bear. I sank into my chair that evening, the weight of the revelation pressing into my chest like a physical force. My hands shook as I held the DNA report, staring at the stark words on the page. Jack watched silently, his face pale but resolute, and I felt a deep swell of protective instinct for him. He had always been my anchor, my steady presence through years of uncertainty, and now he was my co-conspirator in the fight for justice. The next morning I rose early, needing something tangible to anchor me before the day spiraled further. I pulled on my apron and headed to the local shelter where I volunteered, where I had found peace in serving others, in offering small comforts to those who had little. The familiar hum of activity, the clang of soup ladles, the low murmur of gratitude, the occasional laugh from a child learning to forget their troubles for a moment, grounded me. As I dished warm soup into metal bowls, my mind kept returning to Lily, to the innocence caught in the middle of Richard's lifelong deceit, and to the fury that demanded action. Clara, the volunteer coordinator, and a friend I had leaned on for years, noticed my distraction. Her eyes softened as she approached, her hand resting briefly on my shoulder. "Millie, you're too kind for this world," she said, her voice gentle but full of concern. She pulled me into a brief hug, and I felt a flicker of gratitude for her steadfastness, for the small human kindness that reminded me there were people who could see through the chaos. But her words did not soften my resolve. If anything, they fueled it. Kindness did not mean weakness. My compassion for others gave me the strength to act decisively, to file the fraud charges that afternoon, setting the wheels of justice in motion. By mid-morning, Jack called, panic evident in his voice. "Mom, he's selling the house. He's doing it behind your back." The words hit me with a cold, urgent shock. That home, our home where I had raised Jack, where every wall held a memory, every corner a story, was suddenly under threat. I grabbed my coat and rushed to the realtor's office, my heart hammering in my chest. The air in Boise sharp and invigorating as I ran to meet the unfolding chaos. When I arrived, the scene inside the house nearly stopped me cold. Buyers, strangers with polite smiles and cataloged questions, were touring our kitchen, the very place I had hosted Thanksgivings, birthday breakfasts, and quiet Sunday mornings with Jack. The countertops still carried faint traces of flour from my morning baking, and the scent of coffee lingered in the air. Each step they took over the tiles felt like a violation, a silent trespass over decades of love and care. I approached the realtor, my voice steady though my hands clenched at my sides. "This house is not for sale. Not without my consent," I said, feeling the fire of determination rise again. My words were calm, controlled, but beneath them burned the fierce truth. This was my home, my life's work, and I would not allow it to be erased. The realtor, Mr. Hargrove, hesitated, recognizing me from years of neighborhood events, church potlucks, and casual conversations over shared fences. His eyes softened and he nodded, an unspoken acknowledgement that my claim was more than legal. It was personal, rooted in a lifetime of love and sacrifice. As I turned to leave, Jack at my side, I allowed myself a moment to breathe, to feel the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat and the warmth of his reassuring presence. Lily's face, so young and innocent, flashed in my mind again. She was a casualty of deceit, yet she also represented a chance to confront the lies and build something better. I resolved that day, with the bitter tang of betrayal still on my tongue, that I would protect my family, right the wrongs, and guide the innocent towards safety and truth. Walking back through the familiar streets of Boise, I felt a strange mixture of grief and resolve. Betrayal had become the catalyst for courage, and anger had transformed into a tool for justice. I would not allow Richard's secrets and manipulations to destroy what we had built, and in that moment, I understood a profound truth. Even in the deepest shadows of deceit, there is the spark of strength, of love, and of reclamation. I would fan that spark into a flame, for Jack, for Lily, and for myself. The first moment I realized I could not allow Richard to overstep the boundaries of my life. My home and my dignity came in a burst of adrenaline and clarity. I had been pacing outside the kitchen, listening as voices drifted through the walls, potential buyers murmuring about counter space, closet dimensions, and open concept layouts, completely unaware that this was not just a house, but the repository of decades of memories, laughter, and love. My heart pounded, my hands balled into fists, and I felt the fire of indignation rise, hot and electric, curling through every nerve. I opened the door with a force that made the knob rattle in its frame. My voice, when it came, was steady, unwavering, almost shocking in its calm authority. "This house stays mine," I declared, the words carrying through the rooms like a bell of certainty. Every eye turned to me, the buyers, curious, startled, polite, but tense. The realtor, Mr. Hargrove, whose face flickered between recognition and polite embarrassment, and then, from the driveway, the unmistakable sound of a car skidding and slamming brakes as Richard arrived, his fury practically radiating from him. Mr. Hargrove hesitated, the memory of neighborhood barbecues, church potlucks, and small-town kindness softening the usual edge of his professionalism. "Mrs. Henderson," he said carefully, I wasn't aware." He trailed off, stepping back, letting the authority of my claim fill the room. I could see the relief in Jack's eyes, the faintest slackening of tension in his jaw. Richard stormed in, voice sharp, face red with anger. "You can't do this," he shouted, his hands flailing, but I met him with quiet composure. From my bag, I retrieved the judge's temporary injunction, the first legal shield I had managed to secure, and held it firmly in front of him. The paper trembled slightly in my hands, not with uncertainty, but from the raw intensity of the moment. "I already have," I said, voice calm, deliberate. "This injunction ensures no sale or transfer of this property without my consent. This house stays mine." His lips quivered, a mix of fury and disbelief. And for the first time in decades, I saw the man I had loved reduced to the fragile shell of arrogance he had built around himself. There was no shouting back, no pleading, only the cold, unwavering power of truth, legality, and inner resolve. In that moment, I felt a quiet victory settle into my chest, a soft, satisfying acknowledgement that I could claim my life and stand unbowed. That night, sleep came in uneven waves, punctuated by recollections of the day's confrontation. And in the days that followed, I found solace in the small rituals that reminded me of life's continuity. I walked Boise's greenbelt trails in the evenings, the cool air brushing against my cheeks, the gentle rustling of leaves underfoot grounding me. Each step became a meditation, a reminder that while people can falter, betray, and deceive, goodness still exists, and while it does, it can be nurtured, even in the smallest acts. I whispered to myself as I walked, a mantra against despair. People have good in them, but not at my expense. Jack and I began to rebuild not just our sense of security, but our sense of purpose. We made plans, small at first, practical, focusing on stability. I tutored neighborhood kids for extra cash, turning the pain of betrayal into purpose. Their eager faces, the small victories of comprehension, the laughter and messy thank you notes, they reminded me that life could still be sweet, even after devastation. Jack helped organize schedules, offered encouragement, and even cracked the occasional joke, easing the tension I didn't realize I had been carrying alone. Together, we created a rhythm of resilience, a shared project that strengthened our bond and refilled our home with hope. One crisp morning, Clara invited me for coffee at the small cafe near the library. The aroma of fresh espresso mingling with the warmth of the sun spilling across the windows. She was a friend I trusted implicitly, and I felt a flicker of relief in her presence, until her voice lowered conspiratorially. "Millie," she said, her eyes wide. I overheard Vanessa at the salon. "There's more! Something about your grandma's will being forged." The words landed like a stone in my stomach, heavy and cold. I stared at her, feeling a momentary pang of disbelief, but quickly replaced it with a resolute flame. My hands tightened around my coffee cup, knuckles blanching, yet my mind raced with possibilities, strategies, and the growing determination to protect what was rightfully mine. Clara's revelation was not a blow to my spirit. It was a challenge, an invitation to confront yet another layer of deceit, another shadow of betrayal that Richard had hidden in the folds of years gone by. I left the cafe with my senses heightened, the morning air crisp with the promise of justice. The greenbelt awaited me again that evening, the path beneath my feet steady, firm, and familiar. I whispered my mantra once more, feeling it strengthen the fibers of my being. People have good in them, but not at my expense. Each breath, each step, became an affirmation that while life had tested me, it had also revealed the depth of my strength, the breadth of my love, and the limitless capacity for courage that could transform despair into action. By the time I returned home, Jack had already begun cataloging documents, reviewing bank statements, and organizing evidence. We worked together quietly, the bond of mother and son deepening under the pressure of necessity. I felt a profound gratitude not just for his assistance but for the intimate, unspoken connection we shared, an alliance forged not only in love but in the shared experience of betrayal and the determination to rise above it. The house, our home, stood as a symbol of that resilience, and I knew that no matter what else came, I had found my footing, had taken a stand, and could move forward with courage, clarity, and unwavering resolve. The drive to Ms. Reed's office felt like a blur, the streets of Boise passing by in streaks of amber and gold as the late afternoon sun dipped behind the hills. My hands clutched the envelope of papers so tightly my knuckles ached, and yet the weight in my chest was heavy and not from the paper, but from the knowledge that what I was about to uncover would shake the foundation of the life I had trusted and believed in. Jack sat beside me, eyes focused on the road, jaw tight with anticipation and concern. I stole a glance at him and felt that familiar warmth, my son, steadfast and unwavering. My ally in a battle I had not anticipated but was now ready to fight. Miss Reed greeted me with her usual professional warmth, the tidy office smelling faintly of leather-bound books and lavender. Yet even her calm demeanor could not prepare me for the revelation she held in her hands. I could see the caution in her eyes, the hesitation as if bracing herself for the storm I was about to endure. "It's worse than you imagine," she said quietly, sliding the documents across the desk. I reached for them, my fingers trembling despite the steady rhythm of my breathing. As I read, the truth hit with the force of a landslide. Richard had forged Grandma's will 15 years ago. The ranch our family's legacy, a symbol of roots and memories, of summer sunsets and winter fires, had been redirected entirely into his name, leaving me with only crumbs, token gestures meant to lull me into complacency. I sank into the chair, the documents trembling in my hands as the room seemed to spin. I had trusted him blindly, helping his family through storms, celebrating milestones, absorbing his anger when things went wrong, forgiving his absences when work or social obligations pulled him away. And now, to learn that this man had orchestrated a fraud so deep, so personal, so calculating, felt like betrayal multiplied exponentially. My chest burned not with despair, but with the ignition of a fire I had not realized still slept within me. Ms. Reed placed a comforting hand on mine, grounding me. "Millie, you're stronger than you know," she said, her voice firm but filled with empathy. I looked up at her, and in her steady gaze, I saw reflected a truth I had almost forgotten. That inner resilience I had called upon countless times over the years. The same force that had allowed me to mediate disputes with neighbors, to resolve tensions over shared fences, to protect those I loved quietly but fiercely. It surged now, raw and unstoppable, carrying with it a clarity of purpose I could not ignore. By mid-afternoon, we were filing the contest. Every form, every notarized statement, every supporting affidavit felt like a reclaiming of not just property, but dignity, trust, and history. I felt a rhythm in my hands as I signed, a silent declaration that Richard's deceit would not define the remainder of my life. The process was methodical, deliberate, and painstaking. Yet each step became a meditation, a quiet affirmation that justice, however delayed, could still be sought and secured. When I returned home that evening, the house was unusually quiet. Jack met me at the door, eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and worry. We shared a brief, unspoken understanding, one forged through years of love, protection, and now shared struggle. I felt both exhausted and energized. The duality of human endurance painting itself across my body, a mixture of emotional fatigue and fierce determination. As Jack handed me the small speaker from the kitchen counter, he pressed play. Richard's voice, smug and deliberate, filled the room. "Millie, meet me at the ranch tomorrow," he had said, the words slow, almost taunting. "I've got a deal you'll regret refusing." My stomach tightened, but I refused to let fear govern me. Instead, I allowed the anger to settle into focus, the kind of clarity that transforms emotion into strategy, emotion into action. I walked through the living room, tracing my fingers along the mantel, noting the photographs of Jack as a child, of summers spent camping near the river, of family gatherings now shadowed by deceit. Each image reminded me of what was at stake, not the papers, not the land, not even the legal battle, but the preservation of integrity, of memory, and of the right to defend what had been wrongfully taken. That night, I sat by the window, the faint glow of streetlights casting long, quiet shadows across the floor. I reflected on the years of patience and kindness that had defined my life, the countless moments of support and care I had offered freely, trusting others to do the same. And though the sting of betrayal burned sharply, I also felt the first quiet thrill of empowerment. I was no longer merely a passive observer of my life. I had become the steward of justice, of truth, of the legacy that was mine by right and by love. Jack joined me eventually, settling on the couch beside me, his hand brushing mine in a gesture of solidarity. "We'll face them together, Mom," he said quietly, voice steady but filled with tenderness. I nodded, drawing strength from his presence, realizing that courage is never truly solitary when those you love are willing to stand beside you. I closed my eyes and let the night wash over me, feeling the subtle pulse of the house beneath me, the creak of the floorboards, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant echo of a dog barking in the street. Each sound was a reminder that life continued, even amid betrayal, even amid deception, even amid the daunting challenge that awaited at the ranch. And in that quiet moment, I felt a profound sense of resolve. The fire within me was no longer merely a reaction to hurt. It had become a source of strength, a guiding force that would carry me forward into the confrontation to come, into the reclamation of what was mine, and into a future I would shape with intention, courage, and unwavering justice. The sun had already begun its slow descent behind the rugged hills as I approached the ranch, the dusty drive curling around gnarled oaks and fields that stretched toward the horizon. The air was thick with the smell of parched earth and wild sage, and even from a distance I could see Richard's car parked arrogantly at the front, Vanessa leaning against it with that infuriatingly smug expression she always wore, and Lily, my daughter's face mirroring cautious curiosity, standing slightly apart, uncertain where her loyalty should lie. My stomach tightened, a knot of anger, anxiety, and determination that pulsed with every heartbeat. I stepped out of the car, smoothing the front of my blouse, keeping my voice and posture calm, even though my chest felt like it might split from the tension inside me. Richard noticed me immediately, his smirk widening as if he were watching a game he expected to win effortlessly. "Millie," he said, voice dripping condescension, "you're really here. I didn't think you'd have the nerve." Vanessa giggled, tilting her head, her eyes glinting with malice. Lily looked down at the dust at her feet, fingers twisting nervously in her cardigan sleeve. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. There was no time for theatrics, no space for fear. "I'm here to set things straight," I said, voice low but firm. "This ranch, like every other asset, is bound by truth and legality, not lies and forged signatures." Richard's smirk faltered slightly, and I slid the expert analysis across the hood of his car, the sheets of paper crisp, official, and undeniable. "These signatures," I said, tapping the topmost page, "were forged, every one of them, and no amount of deceit can change that fact." Vanessa scoffed, turning her head away, but Lily's eyes met mine, wide and uncertain, and something inside me softened. She was a child caught in the crossfire of adult betrayals, innocent and unknowing. My heart clenched at the sight of her tearful gaze, the fragile tremble of her lower lip, the way her hands gripped each other in silent pleading. "Is it true, Dad?" she whispered, voice barely audible over the dry wind. My own voice caught in my throat for a moment, seeing the human cost of deception etched on her small face. Richard's fury rose, his face contorted with disbelief. "You're lying!" he barked, his hands clenching at his sides. "I earned this. It's mine." I felt a surge of something sharp and protective, not just for myself but for Jack, for Lily, for every piece of honesty and trust that had been trampled in the pursuit of greed. "No," I said quietly, but each word was precise, cutting through the tension. "You may have believed you could manipulate and hide, but truth cannot be stolen indefinitely. This property, this life, these connections, they are not yours to claim through lies." The argument stretched on through the afternoon, voices rising and falling, each retort heavy with history and betrayal. My mind catalogued every detail, the stubborn set of Richard's jaw, the sly smirk of Vanessa, the tears tracing delicate lines down Lily's cheeks, and I felt both exhaustion and determination wash over me simultaneously. Yet beneath the anger, beneath the need to confront and reclaim, I felt the quiet pull of compassion. Lily, though entangled in the deceit, deserved more than scolding or blame. She deserved a chance at clarity, at safety, at choosing her own path away from the web spun by adults she had trusted. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the ranch, I knelt slightly to meet Lily's gaze. "If you leave them," I said gently, voice softening, "I can offer you a room, a place to feel safe, to learn the truth without fear. You deserve the chance to grow without being trapped in lies." She blinked at me, unsure, hesitant, yet I saw the faintest flicker of hope, the spark of agency returning to her. I wanted so badly to protect her from the betrayal she never asked for, to give her the choice that Richard and Vanessa had denied her. Finally, I turned away, knowing the confrontation could not last forever, and climbed into my car. Relief mingled with tension. For though the first part of the battle was won in clarity and moral authority, the fight was far from over. The engine hummed to life, and I eased on to the dusty driveway, heart hammering in a rhythm of resolve and dread. Then the flashing lights hit me. Red and blue reflected against the hood of my car, casting distorted shadows across the dry earth. Jack, my steadfast boy, my co-conspirator in justice, was being handcuffed by officers for trespassing on the ranch ground he had never set foot on before today. The shock of it made my stomach drop into icy terror, rage igniting instantly. I leapt from the car, my voice sharp, demanding explanations, my mind racing with disbelief and fury. "This is war," I whispered through clenched teeth, the words tasting like iron and determination. I reached for my phone, dialing MIS. Reed with trembling hands. Her calm voice on the line, her certainty, became an anchor in the storm. "We'll handle this," she said firmly, and I felt my own heartbeat slow slightly, knowing that we had allies, knowledge, and the legal strategy necessary to fight back. Yet as I hung up, my eyes met Lily's one more time through the rearview mirror. The innocence of her wide eyes and tear-streaked cheeks strengthened the promise I had already made to her and to myself. I was not just reclaiming property or confronting lies. I was defending the vulnerable, preserving truth, and forging a path for justice that no manipulation could erase. The dusk settled over the ranch, warm and heavy with dust and the scent of dry grass, and I whispered to the fading light, letting my breath carry a vow. This fight would be relentless, but it would be righteous. My resolve had crystallized into an unshakable force, one that would guide every step of the coming days. Betrayal had met its match, and I would see it undone, not with blind vengeance, but with clarity, courage, and the unwavering commitment to protect the innocent while righting the wrongs of the past. The fluorescent lights in the holding room hummed faintly, casting a pale glow over Jack's exhausted face as the officer finally released him into my arms. His shoulders trembled, not from fear, I realized, but from the shock of betrayal that comes when someone you trusted uses the law as a weapon against your own child. I held him for a long time, feeling the dampness of his breath against my shoulder, breathing slowly so he could match my rhythm. "We're going home," I whispered, smoothing the back of his hair like I used to when he was little and woke from nightmares. "You're safe now." But safety was only borrowed time. The moment we stepped into the cool night air, resolve moved through me like quiet thunder. I wasn't just fighting for property or inheritance anymore. I was fighting for my son, for every bit of truth stolen from us. The next morning, with coffee in hand and a still sleepless ache behind my eyes, Jack and I spread out all the paperwork across the kitchen table. It felt almost ceremonial, the same table where I had once pasted his kindergarten art, where we had folded laundry together, where birthday cakes had been decorated with clumsy frosting and laughter. Now it held the remnants of Richard's deceit. Bank transfers, mismatched dates, old fundraiser spreadsheets, and emails Jack had quietly retrieved from old archives. "I didn't want to believe it, Mom," he murmured, scrolling through another thread of damning messages. "But he siphoned thousands from the charity fundraisers you organized. Money meant for families who couldn't even afford groceries." I felt a sting at the back of my eyes, but not from tears. It was indignation wrapped in heartbreak, the kind that makes your spine straighten even when the world tries to bend you. "He knew I trusted him," I said quietly. "He knew everyone trusted him. We printed everything. page after page, until the small office printer groaned in protest. And then something happened. Something unexpected. Something deeply human. When word spread through the neighborhood about Jack's arrest, people began showing up. It started with Tom, the widower whose garden I had helped revive after his wife passed. He stepped up to the porch clutching a manila folder, smelling faintly of soil and mint leaves. "I heard what happened," he said, removing his cap and holding it to his chest. "I've got some things, emails, receipts, times Richard bragged about moving money around. I didn't think much of it then, but now, maybe it can help." I almost collapsed from gratitude. "Tom, I don't know how to ever repay. You don't repay kindness," he said, shaking his head softly. "You passed me casseroles when I couldn't cook. You drove me to my first support group after Claire died. You've always had our backs, Millie." His voice cracked just slightly on my name, and something warm flickered back to life inside me, a fragile but persistent hope. Then came Sarah, the single mother I used to help with school runs when her shift at the diner went late. She brought notarized statements from PTA meetings, emails showing odd discrepancies in Richard's handling of community funds. Others followed neighbors whose fences I had painted, teens whose college essays I had proofread, elderly folks whose prescriptions I had picked up when roads iced over. One by one, they filled my living room, passed around cups of tea, and offered pieces of truth that, alone, seemed small, but together formed a fortress. Affidavits were signed, stories recorded, documents shared. It was messy and heart-wrenching and beautiful. All at once, the quiet power of community rising in defense of one of their own. For the first time in weeks, I felt something loosen inside my chest. Maybe faith didn't die all at once. Maybe it flickered back in these gentle, unexpected ways, people stepping forward not because they had to, but because they wanted justice too. That weekend, we hosted a bake sale on the church lawn to help with legal fees. I had fully expected people to avoid me, to whisper behind my back about the scandal, to shrink from the mess of it all, but they came. Arms full of pies and cookies and warm dishes that carried their own stories. Children ran between tables, chasing each other through the grass, while adults handed bills to the donation box without being asked. "Humiliation becomes unity if you let people stand beside you," Clara said quietly, standing next to me with a tray of lemon bars. Her arm brushed mine in a gentle reminder that I wasn't alone, not even in the parts that felt too heavy to speak aloud. I watched Jack laughing with a group of teens he coached at the rec center, relieved to see the light returning to his face, and for a moment I allowed myself to really breathe. Maybe we were turning the tide. Maybe truth had a fighting chance after all. But that night, well past midnight, when the house was finally quiet and even the hum of the refrigerator seemed too loud, my email chimed. I almost ignored it, too tired to bear one more document or message or reminder of the storm we were weathering. But something about the subject line, just my name, nothing else, made my stomach twist. I clicked, and the world stilled. The message was short, only 4 words. "Stop digging, or Lily pays." A cold rush spread through my limbs. My breath caught painfully in my throat. Attached, shaking beneath the cursor as if it carried a pulse of its own, was a single photo. Lily. Her eyes wide with fear, her small hands pressed together as if she were trying not to cry. I pressed a hand to my mouth, trying to stifle the sound rising in my chest, a sound halfway between a sob and a scream. It wasn't just about property anymore, or inheritance, or even justice. This was a threat to a child who had clung to me with trembling hope only days earlier, a child trapped in circumstances she never chose. My hand shook uncontrollably. I whispered her name like a prayer, like a promise, tasting determination through the rising dread. "Not her," I murmured, voice cracking open. "I won't let them hurt her." The email burned on the screen. And I knew with absolute clarity that this battle had just entered a new, dangerous chapter. One that I would face with every last ounce of strength, courage, and the unwavering love that had begun this war in the first place. I don't know how long I sat in my car outside Clara's house, fingers trembling on the steering wheel, watching the porch light glow through the fading Idaho dusk. I had rehearsed a dozen versions of what I needed to say, each one collapsing inside me like wet paper. Betrayal has a way of rearranging the air, of making even oxygen feel unfamiliar. And Clara. Clara was the last person I thought I would ever have to confront like this. When I finally stepped out and walked up her path, every memory of her generosity echoed back at me. Her warm casseroles when Daniel left for college. The nights she sat with me when Richard worked late. The way she'd laugh with her whole chest, unashamed and alive. I carried all of that in my chest like stones, each one dragging behind my ribs as I knocked. She opened the door too quickly, as if she had been waiting. "Millie," she breathed, her eyes darting past me, avoiding my face. This isn't a good time." "It never is when the truth shows up, is it?" I whispered. For a moment she froze, then her shoulders slumped, and she gestured for me to come in. Her living room looked smaller than I remembered, cluttered with blankets and framed photos, and the soft messiances of a home filled with history. But, instead of comfort, it pressed against me like a lie pretending to be warmth. "Just say it," she murmured, sitting on the frayed edge of her sofa. "You already know." My throat tightened. My hands felt like they belonged to someone else. "You leaked information to Vanessa," I said, the words slicing between us. "You gave her details about the ranch. For money." Clara flinched as if struck. Her eyes brimmed immediately, tears balanced on the lower lid, refusing to fall. "It wasn't supposed to hurt you," she whispered. "I swear to God, Millie. She said it was just business." She said what?" My voice cracked on the word. That giving away my life, my home, my future, was harmless? That betraying me? "Your friend wouldn't matter. You don't understand." Her voice broke. "Richard cut me off months ago. I was drowning." She offered a way out. I thought you'd be fine. I thought you'd always land on your feet." I stared at her, feeling something inside me unravel, slowly, thread by thread. "I thought you were family." That did it. Her tears finally spilled, rolling down her age-worn cheeks in trembling streaks. She covered her face with her hands, small sobs shaking her shoulders. It was painful to watch, like witnessing a wound you had no desire to cause but couldn't avoid inflicting. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry." For a moment, I almost reached for her. Old instincts, old love. But something deeper held me in place. The part of me that had been broken far too often, that had been reshaped by Richard's cruelty, Vanessa's mocking smirk, and now Clara's deceit. "Sorry doesn't give me back what you sold," I said softly, though my heart felt like it was cracking open inside my chest. "Sorry doesn't erase what you chose." She nodded helplessly, shoulders shaking, unable to meet my gaze. But the next words didn't come from anger. They came from a quiet, hard-won truth inside me. "Justice doesn't bend," I told her gently. "Not for Richard, not for Vanessa, and not for you." Clara sobbed harder, and I turned away, my eyes burning. I walked out of her house with my spine straight, but my spirit shaking. Grief and strength intertwined so tightly inside me I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Outside, the cool Idaho night wrapped around me like a solemn witness. I breathed it in, letting the air steady me. Betrayal had stolen someone I loved, yes, but it had clarified something vital. I was on my own now, and maybe that was exactly what I needed to be. The next morning, I dug deeper into Richard's files alone. No more alliances. No more trusting the wrong hearts. My eyes burned from hours of staring at documents, my fingers numb from typing, but some instinct kept pushing me forward. An inner whisper telling me that the real truth was still buried deeper. And then I found it. An old email chain between Richard and a security consultant, a memo from Jack's former employer, a time-stamped folder marked incident footage. My stomach dropped. I opened the video with hands that could barely steady themselves. There, grainy but unmistakable, was the footage of the theft Jack had been fired for years ago. Except he wasn't stealing anything. He was confronting a man slipping company property into a bag-on entirely different man. Jack had tried to alert management, only for Richard, then on the company's board to handle it. Handle it. Meaning, smother the truth. Meaning, frame Jack. Meaning, destroy his reputation to eliminate him. Long before Vanessa ever entered the picture, I pressed a hand to my mouth as the weight of what I was seeing sank into me. Jack, quiet, loyal Jack, had carried years of shame for something he never did. Something Richard orchestrated just because he could. I felt the heat of anger rise through me. But layered under it was an overwhelming swell of compassion for the man who had once stood by me when Richard lashed out. A man who deserved so much better than the cruelty he'd endured. "I'm going to fix this," I whispered to the empty room. For him, for me, for every person Richard crushed along the way. So when the invitation arrived from Heroes of Idaho, asking me to appear live on air in a community spotlight about women rebuilding their lives after betrayal, I didn't hesitate. I printed my evidence. I rehearsed my words. Not a revenge speech. No, something firmer, clearer, something that came from a place of truth. But life has a way of adding one more twist right when you least expect it. Backstage, as I stood in front of the large mirror surrounded by bare bulbs, smoothing the trembling in my hands, I felt movement behind me. The reflection shifted, and Richard stepped into view. He looked impeccable, calm, too calm. That familiar cold smirk ghosted the edge of his mouth. "One word from me," he said quietly, leaning in so close I felt his breath along my jaw, "and you're done." My pulse spiked. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. But then something in me steadied. The fear rose, but so did something stronger. Because I finally understood. He wasn't warning me. He was terrified. And that realization changed everything. The moment I stepped onto the studio floor, the bright lights hit me like a wave of both exhilaration and fear. Spotlights cut through the haze, reflecting off the polished surfaces, and the cameras trained on me from every angle. My silk dress clung gently, elegant yet understated, and my silver hair was pinned carefully, a crown earned from decades of living, surviving, and standing up when others expected me to kneel. At 62, I felt an unexpected power, the quiet, steady kind that comes from enduring betrayal, heartbreak, and indignity, and turning it into resolve. The host approached, smiling warmly, oblivious to the storm that had raged in my life behind closed doors. "Millie, it's an honor to have you here," he said, extending his hand. I smiled at him, but it was more than politeness. It was the serene calm of someone who had fought through fire and emerged intact. "This is for every woman betrayed," I said, my voice clear and steady, resonating through the studio and into the cameras, into homes across Boise. Every woman who has been underestimated, silenced, or deceived. Every person who has felt powerless in the face of lies and greed. Today, truth will be seen and justice will be undeniable. The screens behind me flickered to life. First came the scans of Grandma's forged will, the faded signatures and manipulated clauses that had once stolen the inheritance meant for me. Then followed emails, receipts, and transaction trails showing Richard's embezzlement from the very fundraisers I had organized for local families in need, money siphoned quietly, methodically, while smiles and pleasantries masked the theft. And then, the most powerful piece, footage from years ago clearing Jack of the theft Richard had orchestrated, showing him the honest, loyal son and man I had always known, falsely accused for reasons only greed could explain. I looked out at the crowd assembled in the studio, the live audience reacting with murmurs, widened eyes, and rising tension. I felt a thrill not from spectacle, but from justice. This was the culmination of everything Jack and I had endured, the nights of anxiety, the days of investigation, the moments when I had questioned my own strength. Then it happened. Richard stormed in, veins standing out on his neck, fists clenched, eyes wild with fury. Vanessa appeared behind him, dragging Lily by the hand. The little girl looked confused, caught between the adults and the truth she had only just begun to glimpse. Richard's voice pierced the hum of anticipation. Lies. All of this, lies. He roared, trying to overpower the moment with volume and intimidation. I let him rant, even smiled faintly, because I knew the truth had more weight than his anger ever could. The DNA test results, finally revealed on the central screen, confirmed everything. Lily was his daughter. The implications landed like thunder. Every asset, every claim he had made to manipulate, to cheat, to intimidate, was now legally, unambiguously mine. The crowd gasped collectively, the tension shifting from suspense to awe. Richard's face turned pale, a mask of disbelief replacing his fury. He collapsed onto a nearby chair as the officers who had been stationed discreetly for precaution stepped forward, handcuffing him while he sputtered and cursed, impotent, arrested, defeated, in full view of the public. I felt a surge of something deep and cleansing, the kind of vindication that is neither petty nor cruel, but just. The energy of the studio, the cheering, the flashes of cameras, it all merged into a river of catharsis, washing over me in waves. I turned gently to Lily, who still clung to Vanessa's hand. Hesitant, fearful, her small body trembling, she took a step forward. "Mom?" she whispered, her voice fragile, tentative, filled with the question of a child who had spent years in uncertainty, caught between secrets and lies. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, kneeling slightly so our eyes met. My hands covered hers, steady and warm. "It's me. You're safe now. You belong here, with us, with truth, with love." She leaned into me, her arms wrapping around my waist, a quiet surrender that spoke louder than any declaration of victory. The audience cheered again, and I let myself breathe fully for the first time in weeks, feeling the heaviness of betrayal lift, replaced by the solid, enduring weight of resolution. I straightened, eyes sweeping over the crowd, cameras, and the still hum of officers escorting Richard out. My voice rang out once more, firm and unwavering. I forgave much, helped more, but injustice ends here. No more lies, no more manipulation. Truth stands, and it will endure. The applause was deafening, not just for me, but for every person who had suffered quietly, who had been forced to endure in silence, who had felt powerless. I knew in that moment that what we had accomplished went far beyond the courtroom or the papers on the desk. It was a testament to resilience, to integrity, and to the courage that comes from refusing to accept betrayal as an end. Lily stayed close, her small hands entwined in mine as Jack came to stand beside us, his expression a mixture of relief and pride. I caught his eye, and in that glance we shared everything unspoken, the nights of fear, the months of planning, the courage it had taken to hold our ground. The host approached once more, offering a hand to guide me off stage. I shook my head gently. "No," I said, voice soft but resolute. "I want to stay here for a moment longer." And so I did, letting the cheers, the gasps, the shared awe wash over me, a river of validation, redemption, and hope. In that spotlight, I wasn't just a woman who had been betrayed. I was a woman who had reclaimed her life, her dignity, her family, and reminded the world that courage and integrity are never diminished by age, betrayal, or fear. And as Lily whispered again, her small voice barely audible above the applause, "Mom," I smiled, and the weight of the past fell away, leaving only light, love, and the promise of new beginnings. The morning sunlight spilled across Boise like a benediction, golden and tender, as if the world itself had conspired to remind me that endings could also be beginnings. The air smelled faintly of autumn leaves and freshly cut grass as I walked along the greenbelt trails, the same paths I had traversed countless times during darker days, when betrayal and uncertainty weighed me down like wet stones in my chest. Today, the stones were gone, or rather, transformed into something solid and unbreakable, a foundation of clarity, purpose, and quiet power. Jack ran ahead, his laughter ringing out like wind chimes in the crisp morning. His fiancée followed, smiling, carrying a small basket of pastries for our brunch picnic at the edge of the trail. Lily padded close to me, tiny but certain, her hand sliding into mine with the trust of a child who had finally found a home. I felt a warmth swell that had nothing to do with the sun, the warmth of family rebuilt, of hearts mended through honesty and courage. The ranch, once a battleground of lies and manipulation, was now ours. Selling it had been an act of fairness, a cleansing of old shadows. Every dollar went to creating a wing at the Boise shelter, aptly named Millie's Hope. I envisioned the children laughing as they ran through the hallways, families finding safety and solace, volunteers offering hands and hearts in equal measure. Each brick of the shelter felt like a promise kept not just to them, but to myself, to everyone who had ever doubted that integrity and perseverance could triumph over deception. Jack had flourished through the ordeal, his spirit tempered by the trials we had endured together. I watched him that afternoon as he knelt on one knee before his sweetheart in our backyard, the sun catching the ring, turning it into a tiny beacon. Lily clapped beside me, squealing in delight, her joy pure and untethered. I pressed a hand to my heart, letting the moment seep in, savoring the triumph not for revenge, but for justice and restoration. The thought of vengeance lingered only briefly, like a shadow in the corner of a sunlit room. And then it transformed into something I could embrace fully: creative justice. Richard's prized car collection, symbols of greed and vanity, had been donated to charity auctions. The proceeds went to victims like me, people robbed of trust, dignity, and inheritance by those who believed cunning could replace conscience. I felt no malice, no hollow satisfaction in his loss. It was righteous balance, a reminder that harm does not have to be returned with harm. Sometimes, the most powerful retaliation is a graceful act of integrity. As I walked the trails that evening, a small dog emerged from the underbrush, limping slightly, eyes wide and fearful. It reminded me of Lily when she first arrived in our home in Shore, wary, clinging to anyone who offered kindness. I knelt, extending a hand, and the dog sniffed tentatively before allowing me to guide it back toward safety. My laughter mingled with the whispering wind. Simple acts, gentle hearts, they were the true victories. Life's feast had never tasted sweeter. Betrayal had forged me unbreakable, but not bitter. It had tempered my resolve and strengthened my empathy, teaching me that courage could coexist with compassion, and that boundaries once set were the foundation for peace. I felt the pulse of every small triumph: Jack's vindication, Lily's choice to embrace a family she had been denied, the shelter walls rising for children who would know safety and love. That night, as the city lights began to twinkle and the sky darkened into a deep indigo, I sat on our porch, holding a cup of tea that had long since cooled. Lily was curled at my feet, Jack and his fiancée planning their wedding, laughter drifting from the kitchen. My heart was full, steady, and strong. I realized that life had given me a rare gift, the chance to turn devastation into purpose, anger into balance, and pain into meaningful action. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the crisp air against my skin, whispering thanks for every challenge that had led me here. This was the dawn of justice fulfilled, and a new chapter written with courage, compassion, and clarity. My inner force, once a blazing storm, had mellowed into a gentle, enduring flame, steady, warm, guiding not just me, but those I loved and those I would continue to help. The world was vast, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel, but it was also filled with quiet heroes, unwavering hearts, and the possibility of redemption when one refused to bend beneath injustice. As the stars emerged overhead, I smiled at the night sky and to myself, knowing that this was only the beginning of what could be built from honesty, trust, and unwavering love. And if my journey could inspire even one other person to stand tall in the face of betrayal, to act with integrity when life tests them most, then every trial had been worth it. If you followed this story and felt your own courage stirred, I invite you to subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience, justice, and hope, because every heart has the power to rise, to protect, and to thrive.